Yeah, hello and welcome to this video. This is coverage for the long-awaited candidates tournament that has been started today in Moscow. Yeah, we've got the first round today, and I hope I'm not breaching any weird regulations that the organizers have put up. They sent out something that you cannot do a live transmission of the moves and stuff like that, and even covering the games afterwards they threatened with some legal action. But I think I'm okay with what they demanded, even though, to be honest, I don't really give a damn because this is probably legal nonsense. Anyway, I'm going to make a video as I usually do for the top tournaments for every round, recapping the games. And let's see what round one brought us today. I'm starting with the game Karjakin with white against Swidler. Note that the two Russian participants play each other the same as the two American participants. They do that on the first possible round to make any sort of collusion less likely. Okay, we have the game Karjakin Swidler. And Karjakin goes with one knight f3. Slight surprise, he's usually an e4 player in most of his games, and quite often people nowadays switch away from 1e4 if they suspect the other guy plays the Berlin, which Swidler doesn't. So it's slightly surprising that Karjakin doesn't go for e4. Okay, Swidler plays d5, which is a slight surprise actually. I mean, he's normally playing Grunfeld type of setups, or sometimes stuff with c5 and knight f6. d5 based openings he does play from time to time, but not that often. We get a Slav and knight c3, the old main line, which Swidler answers with the capture on c4. So the classical mainline Slav. This has been played before by Swidler, so it's not a total surprise, even though he hasn't played it much in recent times. a4 by Karjakin, and now Swidler goes e6. This line is nowadays a very sensible alternative for black to the traditional bishop f5. The idea of the move is that black will play almost invariably, will play c5 next, which is a loss of a tempo, two moves for the c pawn to come to c5, but white has spent that tempo on the move a4, which often is slightly useless or even kind of counterproductive, as b4 is a weak square. White now can also go e4, play much sharper, but Karjakin plays e3, the traditional move, the main move. c5 by Swidler, bishop takes, knight c6. This position easily could arise from the queen's gambit accepted, but with the pawn back on a2. And black argues that the move a4, as I said, is more of a nuisance for white than an asset. Castles, c takes d4, and now Karjakin goes knight takes d4. After a long think, so it seems that he wasn't totally familiar with all this, or he was kind of not sure what part of his preparation to go for. The more common move here is e takes, typical IQP position, where black normally continues with bishop e7, and here white has a couple of options, rook e1, bishop g5. It's typical IQP play, but note that weak square is usually helping black a little bit. Like this for example, rook d1. Here the move knight b4, for example, can be played without any kind of worry that the knight could be attacked with a3 or at some stage that the knight has to move. Also, an interesting little point is that sometimes we have a situation that looks roughly like this. Bishop d7, let's say bishop g5, bishop c6. And here, after capturing, black will very often take with the pawn. I'm not talking so much about this concrete position, but about the structure. Black is very okay with this isolated pawn on c6 because he will have play on the b file. And this is far more meaningful now with the move a4 being played, as b4 is weak, b3 is weak, the whole queen side is weak. So this is the whole point of black's opening, that he gives whites the a4 move and hope that this doesn't help him. Okay, knight takes was played, and now bishop d7. Knight d4, this kind of play is not so great because white will go d5. And while this is simplifying a lot, it doesn't mean that black is closer to a draw or an equal position. The problem is that, let's say, castles, and then white has a couple of decent moves. For example, queen b3 or queen f3, those kind of moves. And this is black is under pressure, yeah, because that bishop is so annoying on d5. So black is not taking on d4 but playing bishop d7. Yeah, here Karjakin took a long while and then played knight f3, playing this back. Doesn't look very threatening, and I honestly think it isn't. It isn't very threatening. The whole position here is, I think, okay for black anyway. What they normally do, but this is a rare position anyway. Queen e2 is what sometimes is being played. This, for example, is a possible way to continue. This rook d1, castles, takes, and queen e7. This, for example, has been played last year in a game between Nakamura, an Armenian GM, and Mickey Adams. In the this is the Poker Stars tournament, right? That huge open on the Isle of Man. Ultimately, Nakamura won that game, but black is certainly okay here. Yeah, knight f3 is a new move by Karjakin, but not part of home prep. He just thought about this over the board. Yeah, Swidler now plays very common setup. a6, queen goes to c7, and bishop to d6. Yeah, black now gets in this typical knight to e5 move, and this structure is well known from the Queen's Gambit accepted, and similar openings. Black is okay. Yeah, white now goes for activity. That was what he had planned with this setup, and check. Black gives the check. Black can take the pawn, by the way. It's not like it's clearly refuted, but it is definitely dangerous to do so. I mean, bishop b2, white has some strong activity, even though the computers are not saying that white is better or anything. It just is a very unhuman decision, yeah, to grab such a pawn, especially considering that bishop d4 check is simply okay. Yeah, bishop e3 by Karjakin, and now Swidler grabbed on e3 and played e5. It's a very logical setup. White now has this bishop hemmed in, and this is the reason why e5 was played. If white would get in e5, then all of a sudden his pieces would spring to life. So this is a lot better. Black goes e5. And here I think white has to be content with something close to equal, maybe. I'd rather be black here already, but it's nothing dramatic. What white definitely cannot do is play something ambitious like f5, bishop c6, g4. Yeah, this kind of play will probably backfire because white is mostly weakening himself here with this kind of aggressive demonstration. He has to be content with equal solid play. Rook c1 is good, I think, threatening possible knight to d5, and now Swidler grabbed on f4 so that we got that endgame. Yeah, now bishop e6 was played. That's a good move. Bishop c6 also looks very natural, but after bishop to c4 we see that this pressure with e5 maybe also on the cards is a little bit annoying. Bishop e6 makes sure that the bishop is not coming to c4. Good move. Yeah, king f2, rook c8, oops, king e3, knight d7. Yeah, I think that black is slightly more comfortable because his pawn structure is more compact. It's difficult for white to ever get to one of the pawns. This is totally safe here on the king side, and also those pawns are hard to reach, while white's pawns on a4, e4, b2, they are slightly weakened. So I think black is certainly comfortable. Yeah, that went back, rook e8, bishop e2, and maybe here you can try to find better moves than Swidler played. He played knight to b6. The computers like rook c6 or knight c5 here, and those moves indeed might be a little bit more testing. Yeah, rook c6 for example. Oops, I'm sorry, white plays this, and now rook c6 for example can lead to interesting play like rook d1, knight c5, and now a funny move given by the engines, knight b5. Yeah, the computers just suggest a completely wacky line. Yeah, this is suggested by Stockfish, which is utterly inhuman. Yeah, knight b3. I'm just showing you the line without telling you much about it. It is just sometimes crazy what the computers come up with. Yeah, absolutely nobody would play like that. Yeah, like this, and at the end white is probably getting enough counterplay to draw. Yeah, it's just a totally unforced line. It just shows that some interesting possibilities there. There's also knight c5 that black can think about, also eyeing this square. It's nothing serious, but I think here was maybe there was some possibility for Swidler to try something at least. I cannot really shake off the feeling that if you give that position with black to Carlsen, he would torture his opponent for 50 more moves. In this game, however, knight b6 was played.
Check.
Knight c4. Get this traded. And this. And here a draw was agreed. They have to play 30 moves, I think, in this tournament to agree to a draw. So this is kind of fitting. Even though the position here is very, very equal. And there's nothing... Yeah, it's just a normal decision now to agree to a draw. You also have to take into account that this is a very long tournament, and it doesn't really help to continue in some very drawish position that probably will just waste your energy with. So I feel a pretty correct draw. Swidler didn't have any problems here with black against Karjakin. Maybe he could have tried a little bit harder. But he's absolutely not to blame for being solid with black in the first round of that event. The next game I want to check is Nakamura Caruana, two American players, and Caruana goes for Nakamura plays 1c4. Yeah, currently popular move on the top level because the main line openings e4 and d4 they sometimes get a bit stale in view of some lines that black equalizes with, so they experiment a little bit more here with 1c4. We get this on the board. Symmetrical line. Very sound choice here by Caruana. And now Nakamura very early on goes for something unconventional. He plays e3. The idea is of course not new or revolutionary or anything, but usually it is played like that, and it has the reputation of being a very, very sound solid but also boring line. This e3, however, is a little bit different, as white has not played the move knight c3 and black also hasn't, and this makes things a little bit different, as a possible d4, for example, wouldn't threaten or carry the idea of playing d5 to attack that knight. Yeah, Caruana is just playing a symmetrical way after quite some quite some thought, and it's certainly a decent choice. d4 takes, and now knight to e7. Of course, you can argue that d5 could be played immediately. I'm not quite sure why it was avoided. It would seem to be a pretty logical choice. One reason why this e3 line is deemed so boring is this kind of position that can also arise with the knights being out already, with those moves inserted. I've had this on the board with black, against people who really just want to bore the hell out of you. Okay, it didn't happen in this game. Caruana played knight e7, preparing d5, and Nakamura now played d4, d5 to avoid that, and played quickly. So this is part of his preparation. It's interesting that he actually has prepared this line. Knight c3, very normal move. Knight to d7. Yeah, the black problem, I mean, not that he's worse, I'm not saying that at all, but the issue that he has is that this pawn is restricting pieces a little bit. Like c6, e6, those squares are covered, so he cannot easily play knight c6. He has to more or less play knight d7. Note that this is an open diagonal. This is a big difference to the white bishop. The white bishop is looking at that d5 pawn and seems rather passive in comparison. Black bishop is more active. On the other hand, as I said, white does control some squares with that pawn on d5. Yeah, knight d7, knight f3, castles, h6. h6 is a bit of a mysterious move, but I think the idea could really be that black wants to be ready to play the move g5 under favorable circumstances. Favorable circumstances mean maybe as an answer to bishop to f4. I mean, in a situation where d6 is not hanging. Yeah, so for example, this was played. Yeah, Nakamura was immediately getting rid of any g6, g5 possibilities. But if you imagine white would play this, for example, knight f5, and I know rook c1, some normal moves, then this could be an option. Yeah, with the white bishop being forced back. I don't think that this is a particularly weakening setup for black. It could be rather okay, like this, for example, and it continues. Okay, the white moves, especially rook c1, look a little bit silly, but this could be the idea. So h4 was played not so much with an attack in mind on the king side, but just to control g5. Knight c5 by black, activating the knight, rook e1, bishop g4. All this feels very, very natural. Queen d2. Yeah, starting here, we might check possible alternatives for black. What Caruana is playing, and I only now see the clock times. The clock times I think are not super precise here from the ICC here, but it's close to the truth. I saw a little bit of the broadcast today. Nakamura was clearly ahead on the clock. So it's remarkable. Maybe he cannot really be still in preparation, can he? It looks a bit weird, but maybe he was just playing quickly and trying to build up pressure on the clock with somewhat normal looking moves that cannot be bad. Anyway, I'm getting at the following. Now, black setup is probably not so great. Caruana took here and played queen to f6. The idea is to get knight to d4 in. Probably this is not such a brilliant idea, because in the game Nakamura gets some advantage. What else is there? A couple of options. Black can play queen to b6, for example, and trying to activate the queen a little bit in this way. White doesn't have a totally obvious reply. He can try to play a non-committal move but then black will probably play a rook to e8. I'm not sure which one, this one, the other one. It probably doesn't matter that much. And I think black is kind of okay. The game continuation doesn't look bad, but the problem is a little bit that after rook c1, this is what happened. The move b4 is annoying, trying to push the knight back, and then knight e4 is also coming. So here Caruana felt obliged to play a5, which is not an easy decision because it weakens the b5 square so much. Maybe, maybe he had something else, but don't exactly ask me what it should be. If he goes knight to d4, white will just drop back, and there is no clear idea behind knight to d4. Now you probably have to play that anyway. Yeah, note that this is not a problem. Yeah, well, he played a5, and I think after that white has something, definitely. Played knight b5, attacking that pawn and allowing black to capture there, which is what Caruana did. There's really no other move. If you don't grab it, it will just be a position where black is under pressure and you didn't even take a pawn. So queen b2 got traded. Rook c2 attacking this, and bishop back to f6. And now we come to a critical position of the game. What Nakamura is playing is certainly keeping an advantage, but white has alternatives here that are quite interesting. And I must say I'm not totally sure about it. I mean, I looked at this, of course, using the help of an engine, but it didn't give a completely clear picture. The engine's best move, or supposedly best move, is rook to d1, which is kind of remarkable that the rook is leaving the open file, but it controls d4 and keeps this under attack. The idea is to play also bishop g4, then maybe take d6. I also had a look at this move, something that the computer doesn't like at all, but looks very, very normal. And again, this is not giving a totally clear picture. Black can play the move knight d3 here, but this is not entirely clear to me. For example, after rook d1, what was my line? Knight f4, knight f5, g takes. We have a position where we have opposite colored bishops, and this in general should help the defender a little bit. Hard to say in general, right? Yeah, but you could assume that the defender is the side benefiting from that, but it's not clear here at all. White definitely has chances here to push, and it also looks like, if you look at something like that, for example, that white will get the pawn all the way to d7. So yeah, I don't like that so much. Instead of knight d3, probably, if we go back, the move knight d4 is the more interesting option. This also is probably the more obvious move. It looks at this and this. Rook c3. And here it's interesting to note that the move knight e2 is probably wrong. It looks totally normal, but I think the resulting position seems good for white. This, bishop h6, rook d8, and knight to b5. I think here black is under some serious pressure. For example, like light bishop back, bishop e3, knight d7 or d6, something like that is just awkward. Yeah, white has excellent play for the exchange in the form of the bishop pair, the strong d6 pawn, and this is a completely worthless pawn. So difficult, very difficult for black to handle. he probably should avoid the move knight e2 check. The move given by the computers is rook a to d8. Very, very cool move in a way. Yeah? Black is accepting that this is still hanging because he has this tactic, and he at some point might even play g5 to get rid of the support of this knight. How does it continue after rook a d8? Engine gives king g2, running out of possible, or getting out of possible checks. And now it's funny, the computer gives as the best move the completely weird looking move knight d2 e6. I mean, okay, it attacks this, but it still looks very funny. After bishop to e5 for white, this entirely weird line
check
ends in a position where black is maybe still a little bit worse, but should be able to hold. Yeah, we already have somewhat reduced material count here. So knight takes d6 ultimately is maybe not so convincing, but the main suggestion of the computer rook d1 is quite annoying for black. Rook f d8, covering d6, and then bishop g4. This is the key move that makes black's life somewhat awkward. g5, drastic measure, but otherwise it's even worse. This, and this is the line given by the Stockfish engine. I was a bit surprised to see that the computer evaluates its position as more than one pawn for white, like 1.1 pawn. I mean, it's clear that white is better, but one pawn sounds like a lot. It's definitely a very awkward position to play. And this was the alternative here for Nakamura to go for that rook d1. Yeah, he decided to take with the bishop, which also keeps an advantage, don't get me wrong. Takes, oops, that was the wrong button. Takes, and b6. Yeah, and here he went rook to b1, attacking that pawn, rook b8, and probably the next move is the move that evens life for black. Knight b5 seems to be better, going for a later d6, bishop c6 maybe. White is essentially playing a pawn up, as the b pawn is so reliably stopped with the knight being on b5. His move looks very normal, like knight c4 attacking b6, but Caruana has the move knight a4, and this is all of a sudden not so easy to tackle. Yeah, how is that knight going to be harassed? It's not easy at all. And black has a clear plan. This and rook to d8, and now after d6, h5, and now b5, it all basically evaporated to a draw. Probably around here there are still possibilities around here for white to be more testing. One idea could be h5, maybe trying to loosen up the king side, like king g7 and d6. Yeah, but there's also rook d8. It's probably not a big difference. I think the worst is already over for black. That move rook d1 really would have put Caruana to a very difficult test here in the first round. Yeah, as I said, the way it went, we had this, and only very shortly afterwards here they agreed to a draw, which is kind of understandable. We have a position where simply nothing happens. I mean, black can just play knight d5 and probably will play knight d5, after which we have this traded down, and even those 2 pawns will come off the board pretty quickly. So a draw for the 2 American participants. Nakamura definitely had some chances here to press quite hard, but he wasn't probably precise enough in the very critical moment. Okay, the next game to check is Giri Aronian. Okay, let's see what happened here. We have a Queen's Gambit declined, an opening that, yeah, somehow could have been expected. Giri plays both e4 and d4, but more often than not he plays d4. And Queen's Gambit is one of Aronian's main defenses. Okay, all this we know, and knight bd7 is the modern main line. Yeah, nowadays it's pretty clear that white should go with c5 in order to fight for an advantage. Not very surprising to me, I have to say. When I studied this opening like 5-6 years ago, when I made this black system part of my opening repertoire, I was also thinking that only c5 can endanger black. The main point is that if white does not play c5, black will play c5 himself, and it's very hard for white to get anything out of a position like this, where where black has very easy ideas like this, knight to e6. This is just not much at all. Yeah, so c5. It's nowadays the main line. c6, h3. White is making useful moves, trying to delay the development of the king's bishop. a5, a3. Black gains some ground on the queen side and prepares the trade of his problem piece. If you can solve this issue in the Queen's Gambit declined, the issue of the bishop on c8, normally you equalize with black. Here bishop a6 is playable, but often leading to quite murky play after this. Yeah, looks very, very dangerous at first. It's not that dangerous, but it is an issue. Queen c8 has to be played. Yeah, knight b8 is not a good idea. Queen c8 is the point, and now white goes c7, b4, knight b5. It's a very complicated line. Black nowadays has improved on that, and Aronian plays this move, h6. Black just waits a move and tells white, okay, what are you going to do next? And white is essentially running out of decent waiting moves. He now has to move the bishop on f1. Bishop d3, and now bishop a6. Of course, white can do the same now, like this, this, but it is definitely a useful tempo to have, that h6 move. Okay, I don't want to go into this in much detail. Castles, and now we get this very standard position on the board. I've also had this a lot myself with both colors in blitz games. Usual take is that black should be okay. Black is slightly passive, but also very, very solid and difficult to break down. I think Giri is actually doing a pretty good job here in creating something. He regroups the knight, and black goes for a trade of that bishop. Knight d3, that was the idea of knight e1, and now after the capture he takes with the e-pawn. This is the far more interesting way to play, getting this double pawn. However, the pawns are not weak at all, and this f4, d4 pawns, they make absolutely clear that black is never going to play e6 to e5. Yeah, as I said, white is a little bit more comfortable, even though it shouldn't be terrible for black. So we see what happens. Rook to a2. This now f3, the knight is kicked back, and Aronian decides to first simplify the position a bit. And now b5 is played. This is the scenario that happens quite often in this line. White gets this on the board and tries to build up some tension here with those pawns. I mean, it's the wrong way to phrase it. There is some tension, but trying to use this tension to his advantage. Yeah, rook c8 now by Aronian. Looks normal. It's not a good idea to take because of c6. That doesn't win material, but the problem is that something like this is very awkward to fighting this pawn. So he played rook c8 and now queen to a4. Yeah, white definitely has some pressure. Queen c7 was played. Black had alternatives here. He also could have taken here immediately, like this. And then, yeah, that was an idea that I had. Then like rook c7, just staying. The problem is a little bit like, let's say, g4, queen c6, that we get a slightly worse version of the game after knight b4 and c6. Yeah, this is all a little bit better for white, but it's very difficult to say if it's something substantial. I think in comparison, what Aronian did is better. Yeah, just queen to c7, and now yeah, black tries to take on c5 and b5. So the white capture is pretty logical. This. Yeah, and in this position, I think Giri could play knight to b4. And I'm not completely sure why he didn't. I mean, okay, what he played also keeps an edge, but in my mind this looks more dangerous, but maybe I'm wrong. It's very difficult to judge. So rook c8 back, c6, this is the idea. Now white gets this pawn. Yeah, and now maybe something like that. I mean, here white definitely is better, but can you win? This is the other thing. It might come here. It doesn't look good. I know, I probably would have played that, but Giri is like 10 times better technically than I am, so it's hard to say. I mean, what he does, as I said, keeps pressure. It's not like it's bad. He played rook c1. I'm just pointing out the alternative that I felt was interesting. Yeah, rook c7 and knight c3. After knight c3, black actually has a surprising possibility that is pointed out by the engine, and it's something that Aronian does not go for. Takes. He now plays the move knight to e8, basically deciding to trying to hold the position by passive defense. What he could have done is he could have actually taken. This looks very strange at first because you think that knight b5 just wins material. However, black has the surprising move. Well, surprising. It's the only move, but it's not so easy to foresee. This one. He just keeps this. He just lets white take the rook, and now takes on d3. And the funny situation is it's a fork on those two pawns. So like rook a1, knight f4, and here black is completely fine, and it's also pretty simple to play. You can very easily set up a position with black, let's say with g5, king g7, and knight e5 or so, where you cover f7 as your only imaginable weakness, and then you just stay and do nothing forever ever. It's a pretty straightforward and easy draw. I think Aronian simply did not see that possibility. Otherwise, he would have gone for it. After knight e8, he still has to suffer a lot. Yeah, a lot is maybe strong, but he has to be very, very precise in defense. Knight b5, rook c8, and king f2. The king comes up. It just does not look very comfortable. But in the further course of the game, Neither the engine nor nor Giri nor me, we didn't find a way forward. I mean, white is definitely having pressure, but can you win is the thing. Knight b8, huh? Good regrouping. And now rook b7. Not this. This is the wrong idea. Here, white will get huge activity. Rook is very unfortunate there on c6. Rook b7 though is a lot stronger. And king c3. Yeah, if white plays this move,
check.
This is happening. It's quite embarrassing. The pawn is gone. So king c3 is better. King to e7. Rook a1. Yeah, white is still pressing, but it seems to be that there is no clear way forward. I don't want to look at this in any big detail. It's still a couple of moves. I just want to point out one particular situation that is quite interesting. So g5, yeah, not sitting there passively for the rest of the game. Probably a good decision by Aronian. And a key moment is here when this is now played to a rook ending at first. The next move now is very, very strong by Aronian. He had foreseen that he has to move rook to f4. And this is effectively ending the game. It's very, very nicely played. Why is it ending the game? Okay, you offer the rook trade and white has no real way to avoid it. Yeah, if he plays, yeah, I don't know, rook b5 or so, yeah, black will go g4 and completely clarify the king side. I mean, there's nothing happening simply. If white is going somewhere else, yeah, there's, I thought rook c4, but it's also hanging. Anyway, black can go here, and this is also always an issue that will completely, yeah, get black's play on the king side started. So the rook trade is the thing. Takes, king d4, king d7, king e5, and king to c6. Yeah, king f4 now has to be played. This is not a good idea. So king takes c5. And Aronian basically had to see this when he played rook f7 here, more or less, as after that rook a6 reply by Giri, you more or less have to take. I mean, he had to foresee all that. And this king and pawn ending that we now have on the board, it is a draw. It really is, but you have to be, yeah, you have to understand a certain concept here to prove it's a draw. It's, by the way, something that computer engines don't understand. They give white almost decisive advantage here. We'll see what it is. It's the one thing that computers still don't get, a fortress. Yeah, Giri went g4, king back here by Aronian, and king e3. The move g5 is also not leading to anything, as black can take, and now play king to e7. Yeah, king e7, king f4, king f6, king e3, e5, f4, and it will end in a draw. Yeah, this was played. It's also a little bit more tougher move. e5, g5. This is the key moment. Now, if black takes, white is getting a new queen. But black is just playing king to e7. This is very nice. If white now takes on h6, then black is stopping the pawns quite easily. Yeah, for example, like this, f4, and everything gets traded. The more natural move is the move g6, and also the one that all the computers give. And now just king to f6, king d3, and e4. Yeah, black is just giving away that pawn. It's absolutely of no use. e4, king g7. And this is what Aronian had seen, that you get this ending, and this is a draw. It's a fortress draw. White has absolutely no way forward. In the game, they still played up to here, but now agreed to a draw. Yeah, the problem is that it's all stalemates.
Check. Stalemate.
This is one. There's also, if black goes into the corner, there's
Stalemate.
this one. Or you can, if you try to, let's say black goes here and you kind of shuffle around here. Yeah, I wonder. Yeah, this is what I'm trying to say. King h7.
Stalemate.
Another one. So there's absolutely no way forward for white and a draw. Very nice defense here by Aronian, who found, we have to really appreciate that. When he played rook to f7, he had to see this, that this is a draw, because after rook a6, there is really no big alternative. That knight is attacked, you cannot go rook c7 because of rook b6. And, well, you don't want to move the knight back. Yeah.
Check.
Something like that is horrible. Just loses. Yeah, he had seen this. He simply had seen that rook f4 leads to that king and pawn ending, which is a fortress draw. Very nice job. Okay, the final game to look at is Anand Topalov, the game between the two oldest participants. Vishy being, what is he, 46, right? And Topalov is like 41. He's 1 year younger than I am. I often calculate it from my own age. It's easier. Okay, let's see what happened in this game. Oops, that was the wrong one. Anand Topalov. Okay, let's have a look. We had 3 games, not a single 1e4, and here we go. Well, that's the positive part. The negative one is we got a Berlin. Well, anyway, I don't want to make fun of the opening. It's just a good opening. And, well, we don't get the end game. We get d3 here by Anand. Arguably, nowadays, the more ambitious choice. Bishop c5 and castles. Here, black has the opportunity to play knight d4 and simplify a little bit, which Topalov is not going for. I'm not an expert, really. I have to admit that on that opening, but I think that this is not a bad choice. From a general strategic point of view, this is a highly desirable move, but it might have some drawbacks of a concrete nature that I'm not aware of at the moment. Often, black is happy to trade those 2 knights, because if you compare this, the knight on c6 plays more of a passive role, and quite often you would like to have a pawn on c6 to take away some squares. Also, if you don't trade, you often get the situation like in the game that this pawn here is looking at 2 key squares that the knight is directed towards. Yeah, the knight on c6 looks a little bit silly. I mean, this is not criticizing Topalov's play. I'm just stating something. Quite often that trade can be beneficial. Topalov castles, knight bd2, and now he goes for knight to e7. This regrouping is now popular for a couple of years in the Berlin, and it's also due to that reason that I earlier mentioned. The knight on c6 is quite often not well placed because those two key squares are covered. d4 now, and the interesting point is that black is capturing and goes back. It at first looks a bit strange that black is giving up his share of the center, but note that on white's from the white side, there are a couple of things not quite in harmony. Bishop on b5 is not particularly well placed. It will definitely lose a tempo to a move like c6 or a6. The knight on b2 is also wrong. White would clearly prefer to have a knight on c3 here to being able to develop the c1 bishop. So white has a center, but the support of the center is a little bit clumsy at the moment. Rook e1, and bishop g4. We see all this was quickly played. It's of course part of both players' preparation. In modern chess, you very often have the situation that players play systems from both sides. Topalov also has played this from the white side. In fact, after knight g6, for example, this would have been a position from Topalov Nakamura from last year's St. Louis tournament. Bishop g4, however, also makes lots of sense. h3, back, and now again, Topalov now on the white side again. He had played queen b3 also against Caruana in St. Louis. So we have got a couple of earlier games where both players were involved. There are also Anand games, but I didn't copy any references in my notes. Yeah, a4 was played now here in this game by Vichy, and a6 is the natural reaction. He goes back here. Rook e8. Yeah, now we see Topalov took some time. He's probably now out of prep, and Anand as well. All this looks totally normal. Queen b3, looking at the pawn on b7. Yeah, black now goes for knight c6, an ambitious move and a good move. It's not a bad move at all. d5, that pawn was attacked, and knight d4. We see that black here is getting quite nice active pieces. The only real question is, what about this pawn on b7? Yeah, and Anand took it. He took the pawn. This is not a mistake. However, after the move knight to d7 by Topalov, it's a good move. The idea knight c5 now becomes very, very relevant. And here Anand, yeah, he made a mistake. It's just like that. What he probably should have done is play a move like rook a3 or rook a4. These are suggested here by Stockfish, using the rook also for defensive purposes. If black goes yeah, knight c5 here, then queen b4 is completely fine. There is a clear difference to this, rook a3, to what happened in the game. And we will see what happened in the game. Anand played the move knight c4. And after knight c4, knight c5, queen c6. Yeah, note that there are not many other squares. If you go here, this, oops, come on. It's just too embarrassing. So you have to go to c6. But now, this is the key moment of the game. There are a couple of other critical ones later, but this is the absolute key moment here. And a somewhat mysterious moment, as Topalov was really, really well known for being a dangerous, dynamic player, now is not going for the move bishop takes f2. Very surprising. He played this one. But he can take on f2. And after that, white has a very hard time to play this position. Yeah, what's the point? Okay, white has to take.
Check.
The check, of course. Yeah, and what now? White only has the move g3. Otherwise, you're losing the house. I mean, you cannot do this. Or, yeah, here.
Check.
Even worse. Yeah, so you have to go g3. There is no other move. And now knight takes e4. Yeah, and we see that white is forced to give the rook now, give the exchange. So rook e4 and queen e4. Yeah, and this position, I mean, it's very easy to calculate, and he must have seen that. There's absolutely no way to believe otherwise. But what I don't get is, if you see the position, why not play it? Because from here, white really doesn't have any good-looking continuation. You can only select between various evils. For example, g4 is an idea.
Check.
Check. Bishop g6. Yeah, and now white already has to play awkward moves like this to even stay in the game. Yeah, black now has a couple of options. The engine points out something which is pretty strong, but I'm not sure how intuitive this is for a human being.
Check.
It gives this move. This. And now rook f8. Kind of mysterious. The rook was hanging, so he has to move it. And the idea is to play here and start to attack. The best seems to be rook a3, bishop d3, and now white giving away the exchange. Here black is better. It just the only question is how much. Is it a huge advantage or is this still manageable for white? Instead of g4, there is also knight to e3, but
check.
Here black
check.
Will get quite a number of pawns. And this is, I mean, it's rook and 3 pawns against 2 minor pieces. And the situation is not totally clear. Yeah? I'm not saying that black is winning, but this is all just the question, how good is it for black? Is it a clear edge, a slide edge, whatever? And for some reason he didn't go for bishop f2. He played the move knight b3. And after knight b3, things are not clear at all. Rook b1. And now, probably he had to play something else. He took, which leads to a white advantage. There were alternatives leading to a very complicated play that are really, it's very difficult now to figure out. Bishop g6, for example, was possible to attack the pawn. Yeah, white doesn't have f3 or anything like that. This is very strong. Black's pieces are very active here. This was okay, or even f5 was an interesting option. But after the capture, really black is better. So it's mysterious what he was going for. I mean, even instead of knight takes c1, there were relatively obviously better alternatives. I mean, black is a pawn down here, and of course, yeah, you have the bishop pair, but c7 is weak, and it's not so clear what your direct play is. Yeah, rook b8, and that pawn was taken. And here f5 was probably the last chance to get something going. Yeah, white is better also there, but something like that at least was stirring up some trouble. But it's difficult. Yeah, it's 3 pawns already. By pure pawn count, white seems to win, but black is still reasonably active. Yeah, he played this, however. And now after rook c2 and knight e3, white's material advantage is a bit too steep. There are also now some simplifications coming up. Queen to d8, yeah, c pawn is also attacked. Bishop d3, got this trade in, and the a pawn is very dangerous. However, a couple of moves later, queen a4, b3, rook d4. Here, in fact, Anand is giving Topalov some chances again. They both didn't have lots of time left, but still. Here the move queen c2 was winning in a pretty nice fashion. Queen is attacked, and if it takes a6, which is kind of the logical move, then knight f5 wins. That's very cute. Yeah, the rook is attacked by the knight, and if black takes, we are forcing a checkmate.
Check. 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 Checkmate.
Quite nice. Yeah, I mean, this is a long line, but it's not easy. It's not so difficult to assess once you have the idea that knight f5 is strong. What he did instead, Anand, he took the queen, and now after this, here black still is under pressure, but it's not as bad as it could have been. I mean, that queen c2, knight f5 was probably just killing. Yeah, a5, and now in mutual time pressure, Topalov plays this, and this seems to yeah, again lead to a lost position. Bishop c5 was a bit tougher. The difference between the two moves is that in a situation here, white activates this, that black can actually take the pawn. And in the game, after bishop d4, now this is not possible. Yeah, his idea probably was that he has bishop f6 at some point, but that doesn't seem to be so relevant. Yeah, rook c3 was played, and now knight d2. Yeah, it's move 40, very difficult decision. The move rook e4 seems to be stronger, threatening checkmate. Bishop here, and now rook f8, introducing this idea. Yeah, this seems to win for white. Anand's move is not so convincing, knight d2, but it's still very, very difficult for black to handle. The better defense, he played rook c2 now, Topalov did, and after that it's definitely losing. But it's move 40, yeah? We shouldn't be too critical here. It's difficult to do. Yeah, okay, this is what he did. The alternative was f5, which might be, I mean, I'm not 100% sure, but I think this might be a little bit tougher. A little bit. Yeah, h4 maybe. Say bishop f6, rook d7, g5, and rook e6. White has a very strong initiative there with the rooks, and what I figured that it probably should win, but it's not totally simple. This is much tougher than the game. Yeah, the idea is h6. Yeah, you can continue that line for a while, like this, for example. Check. Trying to take. It's not a totally forced variation. I just want to show some possibilities. This idea.
Check. Check.
And white will win this pawn. This is not forced. This is a 12 move d blind. Yeah. It just looks like f5 is tougher. The problem is what he did is he played this, and now you see that knight e4 g5 is just a killing idea. So the difference is that this is just losing straight away, and the other continuation at least had some problems. Yeah, f6 was tried, but that doesn't help after h4. Yeah. Rook a5, rook f7. The idea is that this and this is mate. Yeah, black's king is boxed in. Yeah, what now? What now for black? If you go up,
checkmate.
This is the end immediately. And if you do something like that, rook ff8 is also decisive. Some g6.
Check. Checkmate.
Is another mate.
Check.
Yeah, rook f2. Topalov tried some desperation move.
Check. Check.
Yeah, some
check.
Spy checks, but white has, yeah, enough pieces to take all those pawns and end the black resistance. So Anand starts with a win against Topalov. Yeah, this the first round I think is really important in such an event. Yeah, Anand starting with a win is kind of reminiscent of what happened in the Candidates 2014 when he started with a win against Aronian. Arguably in that case 2 years ago, Aronian was maybe the pre-tournament favorite, or one of the favorites. Maybe Kramnik also was considered to be one. But yeah, Anand beat the favorite with white in the first round, and this started that excellent event for the great former world champion from India. And again, Anand here starts with a win. So very nice start for him after his bad tournament in Gibraltar. Bad start for Topalov, and especially him not playing bishop takes f2 doesn't really, that doesn't promise anything great, for him for that event. So for his fans, can only hope that he quickly recovers. Such an early loss can be very, very irritating. It just ups the pressure a lot. You cannot avoid a second. You cannot afford a second loss in an event like that, because you're not going to win 6 games, and this makes it all the more difficult. So he has to get a win in soon to level the score, or to get the 50% back, and doing that without taking enormous risk, it's not so easy. Okay, I hope you enjoyed the coverage of the first round. I'll be back tomorrow with the second round. Thanks for watching.